the talks in question and answer. So the way we're going to approach this is each talk should last 20 minutes, and that, unfortunately, as part of my job, is to police that slightly. Then if people want to put questions in the chat as we go, we can extract individual questions or themes, and there'll be 2 points at which questions can be answered. At the end of the 20-minute presentation, we'll have 5 minutes for some quick Q&A, and then we'll do all 3 presentations that way. And at the end, assuming we run to time, there'll be a 15-minute slot for some more in-depth back and forth between the speakers and the people attending. So I think that's the main overview of what we're going to do. Excuse me. I do encourage you to put your questions in the chat. It's a good way to get records of people's interests or queries, but it's entirely up to you, of course, depending on how you like to interact. I think now, if you'll bear with us for a minute, we're running beautifully on time. I'd like to invite our first speaker, which is Ishan. Do you have slides for today, and do you want to try just sharing them to make sure the technology works?
Hi, Elizabeth, and hi, everyone. Yes, I do have some slides, so I'll just attempt to do that now.
We'll just do that check. I think we better not start till 9:30 because there may be some people, coming in right on the dot, but we'll use this as a technology check. Oh, it's all, I can see them there.
Yeah, is that at full screen for everyone?
It is now, yes, so that will work just fine.
Shall I keep them up?
It's up to you whether you want to start with you front and center or whether you want to start with the slides. That's your call.
Yeah, I'll probably start with the slides, but as you say, we can give everyone a few minutes to join.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And if everyone, I'm sure you can see better than I can, that the link, there's a link in the chat now that I presume is that talk that, yes, the lecture by Simon Morgensen is in the chat. And this is a wonderful and shocking moment to be at where we're actually running ahead of time. I'm so used to things running, not here, but in life, running slightly behind. I might have to babble for a few minutes. If anyone has any general questions they'd like to put in the chat, that would be great. We've got the recording has started as promised. And I'll just mention briefly, why am I here chairing this? I'm one of the co-conveners of the TNE Hub. So my name's Liz, and I work at the University of Reading. And we have 3 speakers coming in. Vangelis, you've appeared on screen. Did you want to add anything while I stall for time?
No, I was just wanted to make the comment that, yeah, it's unusual for everything to work and everything being on time. So fingers crossed.
Yes, we're all hoping it will continue, but I am hesitant to start because some people may decide they dip in at 9:30.
Yeah.
If they've got other things going on.
Yeah.
Although I just might be worth pointing out, I think we have some other co-conveners here in the meeting today. Who did I see? There's you, there's me. Who else have I seen? Did I see David?
Sarah,
Oh,
Chris,
I'm here,
David.
Hello.
Yeah, because there are a team of co-conveners working behind the scenes for the event and for any publications that will come out. So some of you in this meeting will already know their names, but it's worth pointing out. Have I missed anyone? I think that's all I saw in the. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's everyone who's here. There are more co-conveners who will probably be active in the other sessions. Oh, that's the other thing that I could use this time for productively is don't forget that we have the next session will be at 2 p.m. UK time, and that will be Innovations in TNE, and that will be chaired by Herminia Alonso. And we have 2 interesting talks at that. So depending on your timeline and your commitments, another interesting session that you can go back to. And then those are the 2 for today. And then next Friday, the 24th, we will repeat the same kind of scheduling. There'll be a session at 9:30 in the morning, excuse me, and then another one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, UK time. So by my clock, it is actually 9:30, I think.
Yep.
In the interests of not speaking too much, although I've already spoken too much, I'm not going to do lengthy introductions. I think the speakers can introduce themselves and their topics far better and more eloquently and succinctly than I can. So I'm very pleased to welcome our first speaker, who's Ishan from Times Higher Education, and the title you can see there is TNE and Sustainability, Leveraging Data to Create New Synergies in International Higher Education Partnerships. So over to you, I think, Ishan, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liz. As Liz said, my name's Ishan. I'm a director of consultancy at Times Higher Education. The topic is TNE and sustainability, and really what I want to go through is how we've tried to develop a new approach for universities to create partnerships, TNE partnerships, using data around sustainability. And I'm very keen on this approach, and I think hopefully it will lead to some new imagination about how the university sector, particularly in the global north, can start thinking about their approach to international higher education partnerships with universities in the global south. Very, very quickly about myself, I oversee our consultancy services, TNE and internationalization services, as well as working with universities and governments around sustainability. In the last year, I've produced 2 British Council reports around TNE, one about enhancing UK-India relations and another about enhancing UK-Egypt relations. And just last week, I released a co-authored report with UNESCO on the contribution of universities to SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. So I hope that I can bring some expertise to this service. Right, so just in terms of introducing this topic, why it has emerged is because in August 2022, we launched at Times Higher Education our first Transnational Education Development Service, which I've put a brief summary there on screen for you all. Now, I will, full disclosure, this is a commercial service, and I don't want to dwell too much on this. But on the right hand side there, you can see that one of the pillars of how we wanted to do TNE was through centering the sustainability agenda. And the way that I wanted to do this was leverage the multiple data and metrics that we have from our Times Higher Education impact rankings. The impact rankings were released in 2019. There's a robust discussion for sure to be had around rankings as a concept. But really, for me, what's really useful from these rankings is that we collect around 200 metrics across the 17 SDGs that give a demonstration of how universities are working towards the SDG agenda. So for me, it was about using those metrics, again, to, as I've put, reimagine the way partnerships could be created. As I said, this was August 2022, and this just gives a bit of an overview of the kind of metrics and measurements that we have. In 2023, we had just over 1,700 universities involved submitting data to the impact rankings, over 200,000 pieces of evidence that was submitted, our research bibliometrics taking into publications over 3.5 million, representing 115 countries around the world. We put a lot of hours into kind of evidence validation and quality checking there. And overall, we have, as I said, around 230,000 plus measurements across 75 different metrics and 251 indicators. So that rather confusing symbol in the middle is our SDG logo, but you can see there that we have 4 pillars that we measure universities across, and this is research, teaching, outreach, and stewardship. I'm often asked what stewardship means in this context. I think the best way to understand it is what universities are doing to set an example of being sustainable themselves. So each of the 17 metrics have, each of the 17 SDGs have metrics covering these 4 pillars, although it's also true to say that between each SDG, there is a different balance of research to teaching, stewardship, and outreach, depending on the SDG. Now, a key thing for me is that, as I said, we released this Transnational Education Service in August 22, and in December 22, I'm getting the years wrong here, I've put 23 on the slide there, but it was last year, a fantastic report by the British Council, co-authored, I think, by some of the attendees on this call, the value of transnational education partnerships. It highlighted TNE as a key driver of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, that was good for me personally because it kind of validated the approach that we were taking in terms of trying to center sustainability as a part of TNE more broadly. Now, that report was all encompassing, and just to give some brief highlights there, in terms of the frequency of reported SDG in the TNE case studies, the highest reported were SDG 4, quality education, which is unsurprising given that that's what higher education deals with. SDG 17, partnership for the goals, and SDG 8, decent work, economic growth. And in terms of the lowest reported SDGs in those case studies, we saw SDG 7, affordable clean energy, SDG 14, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land. And actually, to an extent, that correlates with the data we have on the number of SDGs that universities reporting to the impact rankings have. SDGs 14 and 15 are by far the lowest in those cases. So what we see here really, I think, is a general understanding by the university sector that TNE can be a real driver to support sustainability. I just wanted to reflect, however, what constitutes TNE, and I think the reason why I do this is because coming from the UK sector, we do have relatively fixed understandings of what TNE means, but it doesn't actually always apply to countries outside of the UK, and especially in countries in the global south. So we think about the UK Quality Assurance Agency's definition. It talks about TNE in terms of the delivery of higher education level awards recognised by UK degree awarding bodies in a country other than where the awarding provider is based. And similarly, when we kind of do TNE reports and reflect on TNE trends, we often refer back to our UK Higher Education Statistics Authority aggregate offshore record on TNE, which records enrolments on degree awarding programs such as collaborative provisions and numerous different types or models of those, including joint degrees and validations, but also including international branch campuses and distance and online learning, and levels of study that include undergrad, postgraduate, and indeed doctorate as well. The way I like to approach this, however, is to have a slightly more holistic understanding of transnational education, and that can include research partnerships, programs of faculty exchange, and increasingly when we work with universities, especially in the global south, what they're interested in is how university partners can support on industry and community partnerships as well. And I think that reflects those 4 areas. If we narrowly understand TNE in terms of enrolments on degree programs, we're kind of restricting it just to that teaching element. But I think the research and the outreach and the stewardship components of university partnerships is really important here in transnational education. So very quickly, how we use impact rankings data to understand university SDG performance. As I said, we've got these 4 pillars. And what you can see here, I've just put an example of some of the metrics that underpin SDG 2, which is on zero hunger. The first bar on the bar chart there, that on the first line you can see is the research pillar. And typically there's 3 research bibliometrics that we use to calculate that score. Then we've got student hunger. So this is about really stewardship. And this is how universities have policies or impacting evidence to say how they're cutting down on student hunger. Then we've got the teaching pillar, which is about the percentage of graduates that move on into agriculture. And finally, we've got outreach, which is about what the university is doing to combat national hunger problems. So again, across all 17 SDGs, we will have these kind of 4 pillars and scores based on all the metrics which are submitted. So what I wanted to do is really reflect, therefore, on some of the country profiles, and I've partly used the UK's international education strategy to highlight some of the key target markets for UK universities in terms of TNE. And I appreciate that I'm coming at this from a UK perspective. But the countries that I've chosen for this analysis are Egypt, India, Indonesia, Mexico, and Nigeria. So they're all priority markets as defined by the UK's international education strategy, but markets which are all very different in terms of their profile and their contributions to SDG. So I'm going to start here with Egypt, and what you can see there is basically on the top line, the overall submission of universities, the number of Egyptian institutions that submitted data for each SDG, the average score for Egyptian universities across each SDG, and whether or not you see placements of universities from Egypt within the top 100 or top 200 from that SDG. And again, if you quickly run through this data, what we can see there is that Egypt is performing very well on SDG 7, which is about clean and affordable energy, performing less so in SDG 13. For the next slide, what we show here is I've taken SDG 7, which is Egypt's best performing, and on the x-axis there, you can see all the metrics which we use to analyze the university's performance for SDG 7, showing in the green where the Egyptian university score is above the average, and in red, showing where they are below the average. And what we see here, and this is actually for me a fantastic insight, is that on the green we see the 3 research metrics for Egypt: SDG 7 field weighted citation impacts, SDG 7 papers, which is the volume of publication, and SDG 7 site score are all in the positive for the green. And this is very rare for Global South universities to be able to have their research bibliometrics above the global averages. And again, what this points to us is that Egypt is doing fantastic research in affordable and clean energy. And if we go back to the earlier slide I showed you, where affordable and clean energy was one of the least frequently cited papers, I think what that's telling me as a practitioner of trying to create partnerships between universities is that if your university is looking to enhance or collaborate with institutions that have strengths in affordable and clean energy, Egypt will be a good place to look to because its universities are performing well there. We can also see on this slide that there are deficiencies for SDG 7 for Egypt, and this tends to be around the measures or policies that they have in terms of SDG 7. So again, this just gives a kind of national level data, but when we do university partnership building, we do that at an individual university level as well. The next slide shows the Egyptian sector's overall top 5 highest metrics across all the SDGs submitted, and the top lowest as well. And again, what this shows us here in terms of Egypt's best performing metrics are SDG 7, SDG 15, and SDG 14's field weighted citation impact. And again, it was those 3 SDGs that were the least cited in terms of driving TNE. So if there's a gap there, we can see that using data we can analyze potential country markets where partnerships can be created to build these kind of relationships. Now, what I also feel is that when we are looking to create TNE partnerships based around SDGs, it's not just the positive or the green indicators that are important, but it can also be the red indicators as well. And this is particularly important, I think, for global North universities when they're trying to drive and support global South universities. When we look at the red metrics here, SDG 16 providing expert advice to government, SDG 5 producing the amount of volume of papers dedicated to gender equality, or indeed local policies of universities on SDG 12, such as tracking waste, we see there are deficiencies here. So when we think about TNE relationships, is there a space where global North universities can approach that partnership by thinking of how they could support the Egyptian university partner in making those metrics look better, basically? So it's a kind of added value that I think can be really important to support what I would broadly call a kind of more decolonized approach to transnational education, where the global North is giving something back as well in that partnership. So broadly speaking, what I've done is a similar thing for all the other case studies as well. So I'll run through these a bit quicker. Here we've got India, which had 67 institutions overall. Just one point to say is, as well, when universities submit data to the impact rankings, they typically don't submit data to all 17 SDGs, but one compulsory one that we require them to submit to is SDG 17, which is Partnership for the Goals. Beyond that, individual universities can submit up to 3 further ones in order to get ranked, and then up to 17 if possible, but that's quite a big ask from universities. Now, India here, really strong performance in SDG 6 and SDG 7. Some deficiencies we can identify in SDG 2, SDG 14, SDG 16. And again, when we take one example of an SDG here, so this is for SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, a real mixture here between those indicators which are above the global average and which are below the global average as well. So for example, if we just take the research bibliometrics, we can see SDG 12's FWCI is above the global average, but in terms of their site score, so that's the amount published in the top 10% of journals, is much lower. And again, I use this to think about, can a global North university support enhancing the visibility and quality of research that's being produced in India on this particular SDG, whilst creating a TNE partnership? And again, looking at the top 5 highest metrics and the top 5 lowest metrics, we see some good strength there on SDG 8 student placements, energy usage for SDG 7. In fact, Indian universities were represented in the top 10 for SDG 7. At the lower end, some work to be done on SDG 16 student union, patents and citations for SDG 3 as well. Again, running through this a bit quicker, we've got Indonesia here is another new emerging, but to be honest, quite unknown market as well. We see here that Indonesia's got a very strong performance with 11 universities in the top 200 for SDG 1 and 8 universities in the top 200 for SDG 2. Also quite strong in SDG 7 as well. I've chosen SDG 16 here, peace, justice and strong institutions, just to give a sense of how well Indonesian universities are doing in this particular SDG 16. The majority of the metrics for this SDG 16 are above the global average. Again, can this be used as insight in the potential partnering of universities if you're looking to develop TNE provision around subjects related to peace, justice and strong institutions? And then looking at Mexico, so Mexico it's a country that I would call borderline global south. It seems to be located in the global north, but has features of it in terms of its historical power and relationship with the United States that maybe kind of has more global south features as well. There aren't, Mexican universities were trying to encourage further engagement, but there is some data to show that, in climate action, Mexican universities are performing very poorly, actually, with just a couple of metrics where we see above the global average. And again, this is going back to my point earlier on about, can TNE be used to effectively address issues of decolonization? Can a TNE partnership be created with a Mexican university that actually allows those scores for the Mexican universities to go up in turn, and not just scores going up for the sake of it, but producing better research, producing better teaching, producing better outreach and stewardship on issues of climate action? And again, I won't go through this because you'll get all the slides afterwards, so you can see the top 5 and 5 lowest performing metrics on there. And finally, Nigeria, again, another country where at the moment we don't quite have full representation. As you can see, there's only 11 universities in total that submitted to SDG 17, and the next highest metric there is SDG 4. Broadly speaking, much lower scores from Nigeria, and that's something that we do see from Sub-Saharan African countries in general. And I think part of that is not just the quality, but it's also the evidencing of activities and impactful evidence that they're doing around SDGs. SDG 4 is the highest submitted SDG overall from universities worldwide. And as you can see here for Nigeria, in a couple of the research metrics, Nigerian universities are actually doing quite well on site score and volume of publications, but across the other metrics for quality education, there is real support needed for Nigeria to drive up those aspects, and that includes things like getting first-generation students into higher education, developing lifelong learning, and having further educational outreach activities. So what I've shown you there is really just a snapshot of the data, and really just at a national level as well. If you disaggregate that by universities, we have an extraordinarily rich data set that can be used by potential universities to start thinking about which kind of university institutions they would like to partner with if they have SDGs as a central way of looking at it. I just want to reflect on some conclusions in terms of the experience we've had so far, and bearing in mind that this service is about 15 months old in terms of when we first launched it. When I initially developed it, the expectancy was actually would be mainly aimed at the UK market, but we have seen far greater interest from the universities in the global south that want to use this way of thinking to find TNE partners in the global north, or indeed other countries within the global south as well. And what we've seen is that where successful partnerships can be built, universities really have the opportunity to leverage that TNE partnership to stimulate SDG activity beyond teaching. I think it can support the raising of the quality and visibility of research from the global south. We see this particularly in countries like Nigeria and India, where across most SDGs, their research bibliometrics are not very strong. And I think partly that's because the research can be insular, and therefore partnering with international partners will really raise that kind of visibility. However, what we have seen is that an SDG approach to TNE really requires broader institutional buy-in and potentially needs to be embedded into the actual university's internationalization strategy. So although it was fantastic to read that British Council report that identified TNE as a driver of the SDG agenda, I have to say I haven't seen it centrally so far. And this goes really back to the purpose and approach to transnational education, where TNE is primarily seen as an income-driven activity. And there's no question that there has to be a bottom line to TNE partnership development. But whilst it's still seen as income-driven, I feel that SDGs will remain as a sideshow to TNE and international higher education rather than central to it. I think if you take a data-driven approach and really look at the global picture, what you can see is that through research, teaching, outreach, and stewardship, you can really gain insight into other institutions' strengths and weaknesses, and really allow greater synergy development between what you're doing and what your potential partner is doing as well. And I have to say that we've had some different approaches from universities. Sometimes universities are looking to see or find universities that have similar schools because they believe that that will drive the synergy and the relationship. We've had a few universities, however, that are looking at the opposite end of the scale. They might have a weakness in an SDG metric and are therefore looking to partner with a university with a much higher score in that particular metric in order to kind of upscale that particular SDG. And as I said, it can be potentially used as a good balancing or decolonization activity between global North universities, potentially giving something back to their relationship with the university in the global South. And I think it also, more broadly, it just really supports broader capacity development activity with the partner institutions beyond teaching and beyond the curriculum, and including even things like the estates facilities, if you're thinking about those ideas of which SDG metrics can potentially drive the idea of a green campus. So I'm not sure if that was the full 20 minutes, but I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for presenting today, and absolutely happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Ishan. I think we will throw it out to one question if anyone has one, and then there will be time at the end. I'll just pause for a minute in case there are any questions. Of course, I do have one. Oh, I see a hand up. David, would you like to come in with your question?
Yeah, I just wanted, I thought it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you, Ishan. The point you concluded with about the extent to which SDGs are central to universities' behaviour in the TNE space, I think is absolutely crucial. And of course, the question, I think, institutionally for many universities is how to match the ambition that there is from our academic colleagues with the institutional ambition about revenue raising, because like it or not, front and centre to most British universities' institutional decision making is the financial issue, and I don't think we can get away from that. And of course, it's best when these things overlap, when you can gain the enthusiasm and the commitment of academic colleagues to TNE activity because they see the wider benefits of TNE, when you can link that to a good business case that's presented centrally. So I just wondered if you wanted to comment briefly on that, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, David, for that comment and question. Yeah, I absolutely concur from you that that's broadly, especially with the UK, but also we've had some Canadian clients as well that are interested in establishing TNE in other countries. That balance between the kind of SDG approach and what that kind of can achieve in the medium to long term does, I think, have I think there's internal contradictions that need to be resolved at institutional levels. And I have to say that I've only come across maybe one or two institutions in the global north that have a kind of institutional buy-in from the academics, from the directors of international, from those PVCs of external relations. And probably we've seen more from the global south that actually has that kind of combined approach to it. And I do wonder whether that's actually because they are younger in their journey in terms of transnational education building, and therefore have kind of integrated it as an approach from the outset, rather than maybe universities in the global north or the UK that have had kind of a longer history of developing TNE and different types of TNE operations, and have a kind of already operating mechanism that might struggle to incorporate those SDG goals. So that would be my initial reflection on it. But certainly I can't say for sure that I've had enough client experience, to put it differently, to give a definitive answer to that. So that's just really a reflection of what I've seen so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think in the interest of time, unfortunately, we're going to move on. But as I said, there will be more time at the very end for follow-up questions for any of the three speakers. So thank you very much for a very interesting talk. And I think just quickly we'll move on to our next. We have two speakers, I believe, with us. We have Katie, who you can see right there. And is Simon with us this morning?
He is.
Yes.
I believe he is. Oh, yeah.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Apologies, I'm not able to put my camera on at the moment, but thank you so much.
Okay.
That's great. So we have the next topic is unlocking global potential through COIL projects in a TNE setting with Katie Lupton and Simon Best, both from Leeds Trinity University. And I see that you've got your slides up and ready to go. So I think.
Can you see those? Oh, excellent. Do you know that's the first time, including all the times I've taught, that it's ever worked really well. So that's great. So everyone can see that as a slideshow. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we'll steam
Perfect.
on while things are working well.
Perfect.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much for having us here today. As Liz kindly introduced us, Simon and I are here to present our presentation, Unlocking Global Potential Through COIL Projects in a TNE Setting. So my role at Leeds Trinity is, well, I have previously been part of the business team, so I'm programme leader for international business, but my main role is to lead our international academic partnerships, which are our TNE franchise partners. And I've worked with Simon for the last few years. He's a liaison for me for our partner in Bangladesh for the law programmes, but he's also currently acting deputy head of school for law. So I'm going to start by giving a bit of the context and the background around our projects, and then I'll talk through the first project, which unfortunately my colleague Dr. Linda Walz is not able to be here today, but I'll talk through the project that she and I did together, and then I'll pass over to Simon, hopefully somewhat seamlessly, for his sort of part and to provide his example. So Leeds Trinity University is a very small university with big ambitions. We're on a sort of growth trajectory at the moment, setting up a new campus in the city centre of Leeds. So we'll be having 2 campuses. But our main ethos is that our students are very much a name and not a number. So we really get to know our students, we know them by name. We're very fortunate in the majority that we have smaller cohorts, so of course it is easier to do that. But we're very much focused on building a sense of community, building a sense of belonging amongst our students. As many of us, we're a widening participation institution, and a lot of our home students have very limited global exposure. They're often the first in their family to go to university and come from varying backgrounds, but have often not had the opportunity to perhaps travel or interact with others from different countries. The other main focus for us is employability. I'm sure it will be for the majority of universities, but it's very much embedded in all of our programmes. So at every level for undergraduate programmes, there's either a placement or a work-based project, and that's across all of our programmes. So it's very much at the heart of what we do, is to kind of drive that employability focus. In terms of TNE, so we're very new in terms of global. My position was created 3 years ago, and it was the first position in the university to actually look and monitor our TNE activity. Before that, it had been very piecemeal. And then last year, our Director of Global Engagement was hired, and we now have a small department. So we're quite small. Like I say, we have quite big ambitions, but we do currently have 3 TNE franchise partners, one in Bangladesh, one in Sri Lanka, and one in Vietnam. So these programmes are our programmes, they're franchised overseas, they're delivered by their local faculty at the partner institution. And this often raises issues, I think, across TNE in general, is this idea of sometimes competing pedagogies and competing understandings, where we're trying to embed our programmes into different cultures where perhaps their backgrounds and their own education has not been the same as our own, and the expectations that we have that they're going to just be able to deliver the content in the way that we would hope that might be delivered. So lots of sort of challenges, I think, that TNE put forward, along with many of the opportunities. A think we also have started very much, or certainly I have, started very much to focus on the TNE student experience. Our ethos of a name, not a number, it, being very honest, has not necessarily applied always to our TNE partners. And so my focus at the moment, for the first 3 years, it was getting ourselves together and getting processes in place. But from now moving forward, and certainly for the last year, it's been really focusing on what that student experience means. What does it mean to be a Leeds Trinity student studying in Bangladesh or studying in Vietnam? And I think actually, whilst the realisation of the OFSB conditions and the TNE students coming under those conditions presents a challenge for institutions. For me, it was a huge opportunity to get institutional buy-in to what I'd been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years. So everything that I'd been trying to get in terms of equity and parity for the students overseas, all of a sudden I kind of had that sectoral evidence and backing to what I was saying. So hopefully moving forward, we'll be having more things in place to kind of make sure that there is that equitable experience and they really feel like they do belong to a Leeds Trinity community. I also believe that when we're engaging in TNE, we have an ethical responsibility. So it was very fortunate to follow the previous speaker, because I think we do have that social responsibility, that ethical responsibility to consider our impact in any of the locations in which we operate, any negative impact that we might have, but overwhelmingly, hopefully, the positive impacts that we can have and the way that we can work with our partners and not just dictate to partners. So really moving beyond that transactional approach to TNE. So a lot of what was being said around the SDGs really echoes my own strategy around TNE, and certainly the strategy that we've built for the institution, that it's not just about a transaction, that it's more than that. So TNE, a transformative experience, and I took this quotation here from the British Council, and this is around UK higher education. So every single one of our students gets the support, the space they need to be imaginative, ambitious, curious and successful, with a world-class disciplined education that's built on the most solid historical foundations. So this was pitching the UK as a study destination for international students. So perhaps a bit cheeky to sort of take that quotation, but it made me think, how true is that for TNE? How true is that for our TNE students? Do they get the support and space they need to be imaginative and ambitious and curious? And we need to really be making sure that they do. As I said, I think there's a real responsibility to develop that sense of belonging to the home institution. They are our students. They need to make sure they feel part of that community. And there are research links around intercultural collaboration with that sense of building that sense of belonging, and therefore student engagement and academic gains. I kind of hinted at that in the previous slide, that I think we really need to avoid a neo-colonialist approach to TNE. It needs to be a mutual learning process, a mutual exchange. And I've been guilty myself of thinking that I'm training on a particular thing, and rather than discussing with colleagues and discussing the reasons why we think in a certain way, just assuming they're going to understand what I mean when I talk about certain terminology, particularly around academic misconduct. We have lots of different understandings and not necessarily always having a shared meaning. We really focus on making sure that our partners feel empowered to contextualise the content of our programmes. So whilst, of course, the assessments need to be equitable to what's being delivered on campus, that the context really and the skills that are needed locally really need to be the focus of how that programme is going to be delivered. We try to move from this idea of kind of a banking education where the lecturer is king and the students are these sort of empty spaces waiting to be filled with knowledge. I think many UK universities have moved away from that traditional lecture where you're just delivering information that should be written down and never have that two-way conversation. So we very much make sure that our lecture space, our seminar space, our sort of one-to-one sessions or classes are very much discursive. They take a dialogic approach to education. And I think when we're talking about transformative learning, we're often talking about changes in how we know rather than just what we know. So challenging students' perceptions, giving them the opportunity to challenge traditional narratives. And that's really important when we're dealing with partners in the global south, that often, particularly in business, which is an area that I've delivered before, many of the models come from that Western-centric profile. and they're very traditional models of how we understand business. And I think there needs to be that that mutual exchange of ideas of how things operate within the global south. I think TNE gives us that real opportunity to have a global education community, to foster intercultural exchange and to shift the gaze from the other, so other cultures, and not really understanding those that are overseas or maybe different from us or think differently, towards more of an us, to more of a globalized view of the world. So moving from this sort of idea of TNE that has this real potential to be transformational, we came across COIL projects, which is collaborative online international learning, and having the idea of globally networked learning environments. So we had these TNE students in countries overseas, and I was trying to think of ways that we can get them to feel more belonging, get them to feel more of a part of a Leeds Trinity community. And equally, at the same time, our home students, often very green, very naive to what happens overseas, what happens outside of the Leeds bubble. So the idea was to prepare students for the complexities of globalization. So we want all of our students to be employable. We want them to be able to be employed by international businesses. I think really all businesses international now. So if we want them to be able to engage in that sort of environment, we need to prepare them for what a globalized world means. Some of the top skills for 2023, always at the top of the list, is communication, and collaboration is usually within the top 5. So really focusing on how we can project those 2 skills within our student community. They also I think COIL projects give students the opportunities to contemplate alternative worldviews when they're working with others from different locations. They challenge sometimes how they think, what they think, recognise the value in diversity and differing perspectives. They get to appreciate shifting global context, so looking beyond their own borders, and what things mean in different areas. What does it mean to do business in a different country? How are things done differently? How are things approached? It builds their intercultural awareness and their competence. And just as a note, this was actually applicable to staff and students. As I said, Simon and I have worked really closely with the teams in Bangladesh, and I've worked closely with teams in Vietnam. And this isn't just about students, actually. It's also about the staff in TNE settings. And sometimes some of the sessions that we've had with staff in Bangladesh, they've really appreciated that as a means of their own career trajectory in the future. So for us at LTU, we've got a drive and a strategic ambition around internationalisation. So this COIL project sort of fits within this umbrella of internationalisation. We're actually developing a framework for curriculum for social justice at the moment, and so this fits nicely amongst that, and amongst the inclusive pedagogies that we really try to instill in our classroom. So really focusing on critical pedagogies and real world learning. So that's the kind of emphasis of our class space. So to come to our first example, Dr. Linda Walz and I, she works in the Linguistics department, and she and I happened to meet at a programme leader meeting. And I said to her, a lot of our Vietnamese students are on a 2+2 programme. So the first 2 years they're studying a home programme, and then they transition on to our level 5. And they're struggling with English. They struggle with the IELTS that they have to take at level 5, but moreover, they were struggling with just conversational English. So much of their English background was on sort of how to say things properly and how to form sentences and that sort of vocabulary, rather than conversational English, which is really needed in business in order to build relationships, to build friends. So quite important to have that conversational side of English. So we decided that we were going to set up a peer-led conversation class between her linguistics students that were on a module that studied TESOL and second language acquisition. And so we held fortnightly English conversation class meetings in small groups between the Vietnamese students and UK students. So it was all student-led. We held the first session to introduce them and gave sort of guidance and support in between meetings, but it was very much based around that peer-led conversation. The idea for us was that this would encourage intercultural collaboration and would also develop the skills for the TESOL students so that they could practice teaching, they could take on a different role, but for the Vietnamese students to practice their English and to practice how to speak with someone of their own or similar age. Actually, many of the learnings from this were not necessarily around all of that. Whilst there was the intercultural exchange, I think resilience is one of the real things that was built across it. It was very difficult. They found it quite confrontational, being in a space that was virtual. They'd never met each other before. I think both parties were quite shy. So actually just the resilience of attending every week and having their cameras on, and the Vietnamese students actually being brave enough to attempt to speak English, and the English students having the patience and understanding to be able to deal with some awkward silences, for example. So I think it really did build some resilience in our students. It was a real opportunity to disorient our students, to challenge them, and we're not very good at pushing our students out of their comfort zones. And so I think for both parties, like I say, that led to that idea of building resilience, and sort of being pushed outside of what they would normally feel is a safe space. And that's not always a bad thing. In business, in normal jobs, you're often pushed outside of your comfort zone. And it did definitely help to build that sense of belonging, that connection between students that were studying under the same umbrella of Leeds Trinity University. So a few of the sort of takeaways: yes, the conversational English, yes, the sort of employability skills, but actually from the feedback, a lot of the feedback wasn't actually that positive, to be honest. It was around, oh, you know, we felt uncomfortable, or people weren't always willing to talk and we didn't know how to handle that. But actually, when we reflected on that with the student groups afterwards, they could appreciate that actually, well, that's a skill in itself. So actually you have learned something and you have developed. So it maybe took our input to get them to see what the benefits were, but I think overall it was a really positive experience, and certainly one that we will revisit in the future. So I'm going to hand over to Simon now to talk through our international mooting competition.
Thank you, Katie, and
I'm really sorry to jump in to say we are a little short on time, so
Okay.
I just thought I'd mention that now. Sorry, back to you, Simon.
I think we've got about 5 or 6 minutes, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. But thank you, first of all, for welcoming us here today, and it's great to be here and to be surrounded by such esteemed colleagues. And thank you. But this what I'm going to talk about is the International Mooting Collaborative Online International Learning project. So basically, it's an international mooting COIL project, and it provides a case study really for what Katie has just been saying. And I'm going to say a bit more about it and its transformative nature. So what do we do? Well, we it's probably helpful just to outline what mooting is. It replicates real life courtroom experience in a safe, constructive learning environment. Students analyse legal problems, research relevant laws. They prepare legal arguments and then present them by way of oral submissions before a simulated judge. So we're simulating real life courtroom work as a learning experience, and we did this domestically at Leeds Trinity University and decided to extend the experience internationally. The COIL element was introduced, connecting law students from LTU with BAC, one of our international academic partners in Bangladesh. And despite challenges, with time zones and Cyclone Mocha at the time, the collaboration persisted, bringing an additional dimension to the competition through online interactions. Why did we do it? Well, the expansion of the domestic competition included and how did we do it? We were offered training to BAC colleagues and students to support them with the process, because this was new to many involved. But the COIL element introduced this online dimension, mirroring in many ways some of the prevalence of remote court hearings in the post-pandemic English legal system. It reflected in many ways modern legal practice. I suppose the point really is, why did we do it? Well, the motivation is sort of a link to what Katie's alluded to already. It's about we identified gaps in provision as it stood, and we really wanted to foster a sense of belonging amongst law students and facilitate meaning cross-cultural interactions. So legal education programs often emphasize theoretical knowledge, case studies, and they sometimes lack that practical immersive experience. So mooting through simulated courtroom proceedings provides the opportunities for students to apply their theoretical knowledge in a practical context, and by extending the experience through a COIL, we aim to create a more inclusive learning environment. Students, irrespective of their geographic location, could engage in shared learning experience, foster a sense of belonging to a global legal community, and this sense of connection can be especially important for students who may feel isolated due to cultural differences or geographical distances. So that was one of the rationales for the COIL. The other key one was with cross-cultural interactions. By in our increasingly interconnected world, legal professionals often encounter cases with international dimensions. The ability to navigate diverse cultural perspectives is a really valuable skill. So the COIL project brought together students from 2 different countries, transcended borders, and sought to foster an international legal community within our law programme. Through collaboration in this simulated legal setting, students not only gain exposure to a simulated courtroom learning experience, but also learn to navigate cultural nuances, adapt communication styles, and effectively collaborate on a global basis. So these cross-cultural communication skills, I think, are increasingly important in a diverse and interconnected legal landscape. So that was some of the rationale for it. I know we're a bit short on time, but the project was motivated by seeking to go beyond these traditional boundaries of legal education, provide students with an experience that transcended and the confines of a typical classroom setting, and doing so align more closely with the real legal landscape that lawyers are operating in today. Operating in an international and online setting introduced challenges such as accommodating time zones, overcoming technical issues, and by facing these challenges, students are able to develop, as Katie's mentioned, adaptability and resilience skills, and also develop confidence, the ability to contribute and take part in this activity on an international based activity was really valuable. This recognition can be a powerful motivator, encouraging students to pursue further challenges and opportunities beyond their immediate academic environment and professional environment. And also there's the networking aspect to it as well. The COIL, we felt, was an opportunity to open doors to a valuable networking opportunities as well. I know I've got a couple of minutes left, but just wanted to highlight what we've identified was reflected in feedback that we received from the students. We collected feedback from both staff and students regarding their experiences. The findings were really overwhelmingly positive. Participants, including both staff and students, expressed the competition was beneficial and a positive experience. And the majority of the response agreed that initially the initiative successfully aimed to develop key employability skills as well. And we highlighted what these were. We asked for feedback, and as I say, that the response was really positive in developing those skills. Yeah, I know we're about at the end there, but just to sort of bring that to a close, really. And I think participating in the mooting competition through the COIL project has helped the students improve crucial employability skills. They've become better at expressing complex ideas clearly, thinking critically about legal issues, and working well in teams. Facing challenges that I've outlined were overcome, and the experience boosted confidence and prepared for real world challenges in the legal profession. There's lots of scope for development. It was only a relatively small case study, small initiative, and there's loads of scope for students working in teams from different institutions, expanding the scope of the activities to include other areas of law or other disciplines as well. I feel I'm just scratching the surface with this, but the feedback and the outcomes were really positive. So I hope that's just a helpful overview of what we did, and you know, and provides food for thought for how that might be developed, you know, potentially within your own disciplines or something similar. Thank you. That concludes what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And you did miracles with the time. So we're I hope you didn't feel too rushed, and it was really good to see the pictures that you showed us. So thank you very much. And thank you to both of you for that really interesting talk. Does anyone out there in the room have a question? Again, we can probably take a question before we move on to our third presentation. I'll just pause, or you can percolate them and come back. Sarah, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm more of a massive endorsement, actually, if that's okay, because I think what I found really enriching about this presentation, and thank you so much, is that you've really looked at it from every angle and you've thought about it from a kind of inclusivity perspective. I think, you know, everybody, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the term COIL, and I think you probably aren't either, just from hearing you speak. And I know EFMD, which is important probably to those of us in the business world, prefer global classrooms, but this sort of it can't be delivered in an operational way. Right, let's just start doing some of this. It needs that really deep thinking that you've already done, and part of that is also seeking to join up with those existing partners. So from a sort of pedagogical standpoint, I guess, alongside the fact that it's really important work, I just feel that you've nailed it. So I wanted to say thank you, because I think we need to move into that phase now of TNE and also, you know, global classrooms being about pedagogy and inclusivity as much as they are about the stuff that we already know. So this feels like it's really taken it into a new discussion. So thank you very much for that, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're on mute, Liz. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I do this more than I care to admit. Yeah, if you want to ask your question, Ishan, and then we'll move on after that. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Liz, and thank you, Katie and Simon, for a really great presentation. I just wanted to maybe ask Katie. You mentioned that you've got different TNE partners for Leeds and Trinity, and just maybe reflecting on managing the inclusivity agenda within different countries. So, you know, are there cultural differences that mean that your approach might have to modulate depending on that?
Yeah, for sure. And we're also looking at onboarding new partners as we speak. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the diversity across cultures is much greater than I'd have probably ever imagined. I absolutely love my job when I get to work with partners and actually be with them in person. I think the virtual world is amazing, but being with them, there's nothing quite like it. The inclusivity agenda, I mean, it's a massive challenge. It's a massive challenge at home. So I'm not going to pretend that we've got it sorted. We're very fortunate that we have the first Black Vice Chancellor in the UK. So inclusivity, diversity, equality is very much at the heart of what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve, but we certainly don't have all the answers. And I think a lot of it is about working with the teams, though. It is really not taking the approach of I know best and therefore you do. It's very much working with teams to find out about that local environment. And that's, I think, when we decide on our TNE partners, I try to take the approach that you mentioned in your discussion around that wider opportunity from TNE, but it's a massive challenge to pitch that against the financials. So you know, there really does have to be that strong business case before anyone will consider the others. And so yeah, so that's going off track. But yeah, in terms of the inclusivity, I think definitely it's very much on our agenda, and I think we need to just work with partners to address those differences in culture and to discuss why we do what we do and how that can be translated or how that can be interpreted for different locations and different environments.
Thanks so much, Katie.
Sorry, I'm doing it again. I think what we'll do then is move on to the third presentation, and then there will still be time at the end if people do have follow-up questions, because we've already had 2 really interesting talks and there are bound to be more questions that will arise. So our next talk is Constantinos, if you're here.
Yes, good morning, Elizabeth. Good morning, colleagues.
Great. So you can all see the title is Transformation through Transnational Collaboration, Providing High-Impact Transnational Education Opportunities in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that's it for me. I'll just pass over to you, Constantinos, and thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Constantinos Choromides. I'm a senior lecturer at Glasgow University, Glasgow Caledonian University, and program leader for Railway Operations Management Program. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our South African work-based learning TNE partnerships. And the focus of today's presentation will be in 2 case studies. The first case study presents the views of 2 cohorts of our South African students on the Railway Operation Management Program, focus on railway professionals that provide access to part-time work-based education at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. And the second case I'm presenting you today, colleagues, details how an intensive 2-week clinical and work-based in form of an internship on the Bello Pepper train, that's a mobile clinic in South Africa, impacted on optometry and orthoptic students. To collect the data in both case studies, we use online questionnaires with 137 and 58 respondents, respectively. The outline of today's presentation is first give you an overview of Glasgow Caledonian University work-based learning and transnational education partnership together with GCU's TNE engagement model. Later, a synthesis of pedagogical factors from inclusive, flexible, and work-based learning will be presented, followed by the 2 case studies I have already mentioned to you. Afterwards, at the end, the implication of these 2 case studies for future will be discussed, and highlighting how this framework can be or is applied to other TNE projects.
Constantinos, I think you're muted. We can't hear you at the moment.
Oops, apologies. I must have accidentally pressed the mute button. So
we can hear you now. If you just start from this slide, we'll be fine.
Apologies for that, colleagues. As I was saying, GCU is a university underpinned by a focus on social justice, and this is reflected in our motto: we are the university for the common good. And throughout our common good curriculum attributes on active and global citizenship, entrepreneurial mindset, confidence, and responsible leadership, we try to establish, develop, and deliver our TNE partnerships. Our new strategy builds on that socially innovative focus with the aim to deliver transformative education through purposeful partnerships as a globally connected university with an engaged community committed to the common good. This is underpinned by university values and is also aligned to the UN SDGs. We have a long history of widening participation in higher education and providing flexible and inclusive pathways into higher education, starting with the Scottish Centre for Work-Based Learning in early 2000 and 2002, and now embedded in different forms across the university, for example, in the provision of graduate apprenticeships in Scotland, but with particular expertise in the Institute for University Business Education. As an institution and as a university, we strongly advocate access to higher education and inclusion in educational approaches as an equally vital part of any pedagogy that seeks to address the needs of the 21st century society and to address any potential inequalities in the society. It is within this context that we have adaptive and inclusive, flexible, and work-based learning curriculum designed to provide the learning opportunities to meet these challenges, and it is the focus of today's presentation. Glasgow Caledonian University has engaged in TNE partnerships for over 20 years. We started with engineering programs in Oman, in the Middle East, and then expanded to other discipline areas and other countries. Glasgow Caledonian University has many transnational engagements across the world, some of which we have summarized in this figure. The focus of today's presentation will be in South Africa. Over the last 20 years, GCU has worked with private, public, and third sector organizations in the UK and internationally to co-create and co-deliver work-based learning programs, which are aligned to the upskill and reskilling individuals, continuing to demonstrate an inclusive and socially aligned approach and impact through those work-based learning programs. While the terminology around TNE or the model is not always consistent, for the purpose of this research and this presentation, the UNESCO definition of 2007 for transnational education will be adopted as it more holistic and focused on the program rather than on the educational experience. As you can see at the bottom of the slides, we have provided an overview of this definition, which is all types and models of delivery of higher education study programs or set of courses of studies or educational services in which the learners are located in a country different from the one where the awarding institution is based. Our transnational educational model at Glasgow Caledonian University is grounded in our mission and the formation of strategic partnerships. Any engagement that we have is driven by societal and human capital needs, where we seek to be there to support partners around the world to build their own capability and then withdraw progressively when sustainable for our partners and when appropriate to do so. This approach, the approach that we follow, leads not just to high quality educational experiences with personal and professional impact for our learners, but also to socioeconomic and community enrichment. Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And Glasgow Caledonian University will strongly embrace these views. This is a point that is highlighted by the prominence of UN Sustainable Development Goals 4 and its associate target. The UN Sustainable Goal 4 is about quality education. Importantly, UN SDG 4 can enable other UN SDGs and have societal and economic impact so long as the approach to education and pedagogies encourages the development of relevant competencies to tackle 21st century problems around human capital development. Impactful pedagogies at higher education level engage learners in interdisciplinarily working, active and authentic learning opportunities, holistic thinking, experiential learning, and last but not least, opportunities outside the curriculum to deal with wicked problems. Work-based learning is such a pedagogy where there is facilitated interplay between workplace experience and projects and underpin concepts, for example, learning by doing that involves problem solving and learning from interaction and reflection, and an approach that encourages learning agency and co-creation of the academic curriculum. Moreover, work-based learning can recognize and accredit work-based learning and consequently offer alternative means, alternative pathways into and through higher education, thereby providing the necessary flexibility. Such flexibility will be a tenet of future education due to the socioeconomic and technology drivers that will see a significant need for reskilling, for employees reskilling, an aspect that has been accelerated by the recent COVID-19 pandemic. If the appropriate education system and support is not in place, then there are likely to be widened inequalities in the society. Access to education and inclusion in educational approaches are an equally vital part of any pedagogy that seeks to address the needs of the 21st century society and to address any potential inequalities. It is this context that an inclusive and flexible curriculum design framework is required to provide the learning opportunities to meet these challenges, and it is the focus of today's presentation. In the next slide, colleagues, a synthesis of the pedagogical factors from inclusive, flexible, and work-based learning will be presented, followed then by the two case studies. As it has been presented to you already and outlined, an approach to meet the educational demands for 21st century learners can be an inclusive, flexible, work-based learning pedagogy. Work-based learning encompasses different forms of engagement of learners within the workplace, at, for, and through work, but all include a tripartite relationship between the student, the university, and the organization, and recognize the connection between learning and doing that takes place in a real-world problems and situation. In the university context, work-based learning includes placements as well co-designed between the university and organization, programs and apprenticeship programs. These later programs offer access to an inclusion in higher education for many, as they often reward prior formal and informal learning, as well as engage learners in authentic learning activities. As may be expected, there are different conceptualizations of inclusivity and flexibility in education, which are highlighted in the table on the next slide. First, we have the aspects of inclusivity range from removing socioeconomic and socio-cultural barriers to more responsive curricula. Second, while flexibility reflects different pace, place, and mode, as well as different pedagogic ideas relevant to the enhanced impact for flexibility, for example, learning empowerment, social learning, boundary closing, adaptability, and accessibility, it can be seen that there are overlaps between inclusive, flexible, and work-based learning, which are synthesized in the inclusive, flexible, and work-based framework. These factors focus around socio-cultural aspects, such as the removing barriers through systems and pedagogies, choice in place, pace, and mode of delivery, making learning real and relevant to individual learners and individual organizations, and finally, respecting the diversity and importance of value alignment. This inclusive, flexible, and work-based learning framework that we have adopted seeks to be inclusive of both explicit curricula and implicit curricula. The outline framework is not process-driven. Rather, it seeks to highlight dimensions that necessarily shape an effective curriculum that is inclusive and flexible and makes best use of engaging with real-world problems. Additionally, it is important to consider the TNE context of the cases to be explored in this presentation. A 2021 British Council study highlighted that TNE programs have an impact in addressing market and skills needed to grow business in hosting countries. Moreover, TNE affords access to education that is socially inclusive, as offers local access to high quality education, and can have a profound personal impact on those that study a TNE opportunity. The same British Council report also identifies as a gap in the literature the need to examine the impact of TNE programs and partnerships more holistically, an aspect that our two case studies seek to address partially. The framework is consistent with our own strategy for learning, which has dimensions of active global citizenship, entrepreneurial mindset, systems thinking, responsible leadership, and last but not least, compassion and empathy and confidence. Furthermore, it aligns well with the GCU common good attributes, expected behaviors of active global citizenship, confidence, and entrepreneurial mindset, and responsible leadership. In this slide, colleagues, we can see the different conceptualizations of inclusivity and flexibility in education that has informed our TNE curriculum design and development. Let's move on now to the two case studies that we present to you today. Here, we outline the two cases based on a flexible and work-based learning curriculum design framework applied in South Africa. These cases will demonstrate the mutual exchange of value and personal and professional impact to students in South Africa, as well as to students based in Scotland. With regard to the methodological approach, we use a case study approach using both qualitative and quantitative data, using online questionnaires that submitted to the students. For the Railway Operations Management Program, we have approached students in cohort 5 and cohort 6. This is students starting their academic journey in 2017 and 2018, and we had a 28 and 41 response rate, respectively. For the optometry and orthoptic students and the Palo-Pepper train, we have approached all 240 students who have participated in that program between 2014 and 2018, and we had an overall response rate of 24%. Let me give you a brief overview of the first case study, the Railway Operations Management Program. A suite of Railway Operations Management Program has been led and delivered by GCU to Transnet Freight Rail employees in South Africa since 2012. Transnet Freight Rail is the parastatal organization in South Africa responsible for the management and running on freight rail services and upkeep of the railway network. These programs were co-designed and co-delivered in partnership with Transnet Freight Rail, the University of Johannesburg, and the Chartered Institution of Railway Operators, enhancing professional standards in the industry. The delivery for these programs takes place through a blended learning approach, mixing some face-to-face delivery in Johannesburg with distance online learning through the virtual learning environment. These programs are aligned to Transnet overall strategy as well as organizational development strategy to develop its people by equipping them with the railway-specific knowledge and competences to meet the current and future requirements of the business. The GCU-led program sees the development of railway professionals in a work-based program, starting in a part-time blended mode with a mixture of railway-specific modules which are delivered by colleagues by the University of Johannesburg, along with personal professional development and consultancy project modules delivered and facilitated by colleagues by Glasgow Caledonian University. These modules delivered in South Africa were originally adapted from the UK and Ireland version of the programs, but in 2016 it became more distinct after program reapproval and the addition of honors and master's level. The final award to the students is obtained by Glasgow Caledonian University. A key characteristic of this program is that each student enrolls for just one level and obtains an award at the end of every level. For example, at the starting level 1, certificate level, students graduate with a certificate of higher education, which offers the company and the student the required flexibility and allows a more inclusive approach and more aligned to personal and professional needs. This slide provides an overview and synopsis of the key component and educational focus of each level of the Railway Operation Management Program. Each level starts with a PPD module. There are railway-specific modules in the between, and each level is concluded by consultancy type project that the students undertake in the workplace. By analyzing the findings of the online questionnaires, we have identified 4 areas that the program make a strong and positive impact. These 4 areas are societal impact, curriculum delivery, around personal impact, and around organizational impact. Being conscious of time, I will just briefly highlight some areas within the 4 aspects of impact. Starting with societal impact, one of the benefits of the program is about the inclusivity that offers through access to higher education for many students. We have extensively used since the conception of the program recognition of prior informal learning to gain entry into each level of the program, particularly at certificate, diploma, and degree levels, removing a socio-cultural barrier in accessing a higher education academic program. In addition, since the students are sponsored by the organization, that removes some of the economic barriers to study at the university level. In addition, we offer entry tests to the students in consideration and in line with inclusive considerations in the curriculum design framework. Finally, this program is aligned to UN SDGs for quality education, 8, decent work and economic growth, 9, industry innovation and infrastructure, and finally 17, which is about partnerships and goals. With regards to the personal impact for the students, since 2012, we had over 900 graduates. The program provided a positive opportunity. So, for example, we had a very increased number of students who have studied at 3 or more levels of the program, showing that the work-based learning program is helping to develop individuals and human capacity within the organization. These graduates have acted as role models for their families and communities, showing that studying at university is possible and when you thought it may not be possible. Many of our graduates told us that they are the first people within their wider family that managed to attain a university gratification, and that makes us really proud as academics. Finally, the program supports the promotion within the organization. So every year, the students attending the program have been carefully selected, and they use this program to develop themselves to assume positions of higher responsibility within the organization. With regards to the curriculum delivery, the curriculum enables students to meet colleagues from other areas within the country and departments, and offer the opportunity for an enhanced course departmental or course disciplinary discussion. This openness that the program has offered to the learners develops a much greater degree of critical thinking, systems thinking, and creativity in the workplace that leads to improved decision making and problem solving. The ability for the students to look for alternative solutions to workplace problems has prompted by the explicit curricula that saw international benchmarking and the development of metacognitive skills to support lifelong learning and improve organizational performance. With regards to the organizational impact, as I have already said, this program has improved the succession planning within the organization, has increased the value chain awareness, and the work-based consultancy projects that students undertake at the end of each year are having a profound impact on the business. Respondents in cohort 6 indicated that 92% of them have applied knowledge for the program already in the workplace, and 91% believe that such application already had an operational impact. The project that the students usually undertake having a focus on improved customer centricity, leadership, technology adaptation management, as well as more technical issues, for example, improving track maintenance policy and approaches. While the above findings have been presented as separate themes, the themes are interconnected. At the heart is the ethos, principles, and nature of work-based learning, foster inclusive opportunities, engage students in authentic learning through the curriculum flexibility. Let me now talk you through the second case very briefly. The second case is about the optometry and orthoptic students and the Pello Pepper train in South Africa. In 2014, GCU extended its partnership with Transnational with a view to linking GCU's common good mission to that of the corporate and social responsibility agenda of its client. Specifically, the Pello Pepper 1 and 2 train project, which provides primarily healthcare services to vulnerable and rural communities residing within and around transit operations, treating about 360,000 patients every year. The focus of the Pelopeppa Train project saw final year optometry and orthoptic students from Scotland volunteering to work in South Africa during the summer break. This internship involves students using clinical skills developed during their education in Scotland to provide eye examination to patients attending the Pelopeppa trains under the supervision of South African optometrists. The student traveled to rural locations in South Africa in small pre-selected groups, living and working on the train for a period of 2 weeks. The students work with a team made of eye care professionals, South African optometry students, and interpreters to enable 200 patients to be examined every day. Each student would typically see 150 patients over the 2-week period internship. Since 2014, 240 students have examined more than 40,000 patients. Their involvement means that they gain critical expertise, but also have the opportunity to support the Pelopeppa mission.
Sorry, I'm going to just jump in to say we're very short of time. If
Yeah,
you're able to wrap it up very
yes,
quickly.
just have a couple more slides. Thank you very much. The impact of this TNE endeavor focuses on society, the impact of cells and others, and clinical aspects. With regards to the societal impact, it allows students to recognize and appreciate the differences in eye care services and referral guidelines between the UK and the South African healthcare systems. The students learned a lot about the importance of tolerance and understandings of other people's cultures. And this TNE activity is aligned to UN SDGs 3, which is about good health and well-being, and 17 partnership for goals. With regards to the impact for self and others, the students develop confidence in making autonomous clinical decisions. They learn how to work as part of a team with teamwork aspect of being different healthcare, of having different healthcare practices, a bit of South Africa and UK context working together. And it was an affirmation of the students' learning and professionalism. Finally, the critical impact. The GCU students use this opportunity to improve their clinical and communication skills, examining between 150 and 200 patients during the 2-week placement, and exposure to the students to patients with the range of eye conditions and different pathologies providing insights into conditions that the students would not normally see within a UK context. Finally, the conclusion of these 2 case studies is that the impacts from TNE partnership result from frameworks that create learning opportunities that enable students to develop holistically. Currently, Glasgow Caledonian University and the Institute of University Business Education is at various stages of development in adapting this framework to other cases in South Africa, around nursing in Tanzania, and around engineering in Eswatini and South Africa, demonstrating its potential use in other discipline areas and to address the challenging programs that the UN SDGs seeks to tackle. This final slide summarizes the aspect of the 2 cases and how they embody inclusivity, flexibility, and impact. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present our South African work-based learning TNE initiatives. And I'm now happy to take any questions that colleagues might have.
Sorry for that. Does anyone have a question they'd like to while I just cough here, maybe someone else could throw in a question. Well, thank you for that, Constantinos. It sounds like you've done a lot of work on this work-based learning, and has that come up? Has the university made any comments or any reaction about the investment of time or effort that has been put into these projects, or has that been taken as that's just fine?
No, we're very, very proud of the work that we're doing, and we are very passionate about what we're doing. And over the duration of this program now lasts for about 10 years. We have developed some fantastic working relations with partners, and this program has been a fantastic learning opportunity from us to understand the needs and the way people work in different contexts, different cultural contexts, different business contexts. And I'm proud to say that we are just about to start the next cohort 10 in a few months, and also with the provision of a doctoral level studies for the students. And what is also good to say that as a part of this program, the knowledge, the skills and behaviors we have used from our R&D partnerships with the necessary modification and amendment have been used, and they inform the programs that we deliver in the UK. So it's a learning opportunity for us academics and the university as a whole, and we're very proud of these TNE initiatives.
Thank you very much. So we are almost at the end of this session. So I think we're going to have to pull it to a close. I just, on behalf of everyone here and on behalf of the TNE Hub, I'd like to say a big thank you to the speakers who've presented the 4 very interesting talks. From my own perspective, it's especially interesting to hear this emphasis on the Global South. Like many colleagues involved in TNE, my focus has always been on China because that represents such a large area for TNE. So it's really useful to be reminded that there are many, many other areas of the world where there's good practice and lots of TNE partnerships taking place. So I think I see Vangelis. Do you have anything to say as we close it up today beyond? I'll just say thank you to our speakers and I'll hand it over to you while I just go away and cough.
And I would like just to say thank you for the excellent chairing and management of the session. So well done, everyone. And I think that was a very, very interesting and valuable session with a lot of really, really nice takeaways for everyone to consider. So I'm sure that the discussion will continue outside of this forum. So thanks a lot, and see you again at 2. Bye, everyone.